Welcome back to Week 3 of Prospect Football Weekly, brought to you by Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm your host, Paul Evers, and I'm back here with Coach Sebestyen. Coach, thanks for joining us once again.
Paul, it's good to see you again.
So last week against Barrington, it was a little bit of a rough game. Looking back on it, what are your thoughts on the game?
Do I have to look back on it? That's my first thought. I think each week you learn a little bit more about where you're at as a team. I think one of the things I know you asked last week is, was that a complete performance game one? And I talked about the fact that no, we've got a lot of work to do, and you see why. I think one, you ran up against a very good football team in Barrington. Barrington's a talented team. I think it's a team that has demonstrated that they're going to be a very tough team and opponent for anyone they play. So for us, it was a good measuring stick of where we're at as we enter, week 2 of the season. We start getting ready to play these 2 crossover games against the CSL. I think we learned a lot about ourselves. I think we understand a little bit of, we did not play to our potential and where we should be. But at the same time, understanding that doesn't necessarily define us the same way week 1 doesn't necessarily define you. It's a larger, body of work that we're trying to put together. So we learned from what we did well. We learned from what we didn't do well, and we hopefully go forward here and get ourselves prepared to go play Niles North, and we put this one behind us.
What do you think your team could have done better on Friday night?
I think the list could be long in that one. I think the biggest thing, to be very frank with you, is we just, and we've talked a lot about it with our kids, is we did not necessarily play as units collectively well together. We'd have a group of guys do well maybe on one side of the ball for a couple plays, and then we'd have a couple breakdowns. And defensively, if you have one guy not playing his responsibility, you can get away with that. 2 guys, now you're in trouble. 3, you're going to have a big play, and in too many cases we had guys trying to cover for other people, and you can't do that successfully defensively and be a unit that's going to work. I think offensively we did the same thing. We only were on the field for 36 total plays on offense. For a ball control offense like ourselves, we can't do that. We need to be in control of the game clock, in control of the ball as a game goes on, and we were not in that game. And that's because we didn't control the line of scrimmage. So I think that was a factor. Special teams wise, I think our return team did a really nice job in terms of our kickoff return. Dante Sakala had a really nice game returning the ball. But we committed turnovers there. The flubbed kick by them when it's 28-7 that we fumble and give back to them late in the game. Dante, has a nice return, but it gets popped from behind. Offensively, we did the same thing. We fumbled the first series after Dante set up a really nice return for us. We had the ball on the 30-yard line of Barrington on the first series of the game. Who knows what happens if we go down and score or kick a field goal from that situation. Now it's 3-0 or it's 7-0. Maybe it's a little different complexion, at least to the start of the game. So unfortunately, we just kept shooting ourselves in the foot, and you can't do that against a very good football team. We made mistakes and they capitalized, and when you're going to do that against a team the caliber of Barrington, you're going to pay the price for that.
So what do you think you can specifically take away from that game going forward?
I think you can take away a lot. I think you can take away what we looked at on Saturday morning. We're looking at what was our effort level like, what was our focus in terms of our details, were we playing our responsibilities as a unit, were we working with our defensive line, our linebackers, our DBs together, were we working as an offensive line, our receiving core, are we on our blocking schemes? I think what we found very quickly is some of the mistakes that we were making were things that were self-inflicted. Some of it was playing a very good football team who took advantage and did some good things that forced us into situations. So I think that was the biggest thing going forward, is that we've got to make sure that we are much crisper in terms of what we're doing on a play-to-play basis. And if we can do that, I think we'll be better off. So it's a good wake-up call for us to go forward and understand that we can't just show up without paying attention to very specific details. We've got to make sure that we're doing our job every opportunity we get so that we are going to be successful as a team going forward. We're not going to be many times the most talented team that walks on a field, so we've got to be the more disciplined unit and playing as a unit together, all 37 of us, to be successful. And if we do that, we're going to give ourselves a better chance more times than not.
And then Barrington, we knew they had a high-profile offense. They ended up gaining 544 total yards on offense. What do you think your defense needs to do and work on to try and limit explosive offenses going forward?
I think one of the things, and I established a rule on Saturday that we're no longer allowed to give up touchdown the first 2 plays of the game. Because we've now done that 2 weeks in a row. So they've been banned from ever doing that again. If they do it again, there's going to be some trouble for us going in the future. But seriously, I think we just need to really focus on everybody doing their job and understanding how they work within the larger unit. I think at times in that game, when we go back and look at film, and we started to abandon some of the different things that we normally do. And we got a little frantic, unfortunately, when that thing got to 14-0, which is unfortunate. I think we learned under a little bit of heat how not to respond as a unit, as a whole. And I think that's a good thing if we use it. If we don't learn from it and that continues to be a concern, that's going to be a problem down the road. I think if we learn from it, it's a situation that we grow from going forward. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just continue to play as a unit. And if we do that, I think we'll be okay.
What is the play that sticks out in your mind the most from Friday's game?
I think the play of Stu Isteefanos sticks out a lot for us at this point. Looking at some of the positives of what we did in that game, I think Stu flew the ball really well. He made some really nice plays on the edge, especially when he's out in space as a corner. I think the 43-yard touchdown pass you see from Andrew Shaffis to Zach Gleason, that's Zach's first touchdown catch as a varsity football player for us here at Prospect. I think that continues to prove the idea of the what I'm liking to call the Prospect Football Weekly bump for those who have been special guests here. So we're hoping Stu's going to be on later, that maybe that will help him in his game. Because obviously Dante had the good first game, Zach had the good second game after his appearance in terms of the catch. So I think there's some positive things that go forward here. I think Alex Palczewski playing tackle for the first time after moving out from guard, he had a pretty nice game. Some of our receiving core did a nice job on the edge blocking. I thought Evan Sadlon and Sam Stolodakis played relatively well on the defensive line. So we had some nice individual efforts. I thought our kick return team did a really nice job. It's putting together more of a unit focus, I think, going forward that's going to be big. But there were some good things to take from the game. I really liked how Stu played. I really liked how Dante played. There's some positives going forward, and that's what we're going to look to use going into this week against Niles North.
As you mentioned, Stu will be brought on in just a moment, but before we go to him, one more question for you. What part of your team would you like to highlight from just the first couple of weeks? What part of your team do you think is playing the best so far?
I think I've been very impressed by our consistency for the most part with our special teams. That's always a unit that a lot of people struggle with at times. Because you got to get kids to buy into it. Our kids have bought into our special teams concepts. We've now in 2 weeks had a very good field position in terms of our starting field position for our offense from our kickoff return team. Our blocking scheme, the kids did a really nice job blocking for Dante this week. The punt block in the first week, the PAT block, our kickoff coverage has been relatively good for the most part. Obviously, having Jack, kicking off helps that. So I think that's really the thing right now is I think our special teams is probably ahead of the game in terms of where we would expect them to be. I think right now we've got to get our defense and our offense a little bit more on track in terms of what we're doing. Offensively we're only averaging about 150 yards rushing a game, which is not really kind of what we do. For an offense that averaged about 300 yards rushing last year, we've got to move that forward. Defensively, we've got to cut down on the rushing. So if we can stop the run and run the ball, I think we're going to be a more effective football program. And that's what we're looking to do as we go forward and improve as we go forward here, this week with Niles North and then in the future.
All right, thank you, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
We will bring you back on later to preview next week's game against Niles North. Coming up next, defensive back Stu Isteefanos. We are here with defensive back and part-time running back Stu Isteefanos. Stu, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
What do you think is the key to your guys' defensive unit this year?
I think the key is all working together as a unit, because you can't just be individuals out there on defense. Defense is all about being a team, and if we're all doing what we're supposed to do, our defense could be a really dangerous part of our football team.
What are your goals as a defense this year?
Well, obviously to stop the offense, but I think a big part is to get the ball back to our offense. I think that'll help us a lot.
What are your goals personally when playing defense?
My goals, playing defense, just do my job, not let any passes, get over my head. Hold the point at the line. Let my other teammates make the big plays, trying make the play bounce back in, so my linebackers, my safeties can make the play, and just really do my job out there.
What is it like each week when your defensive line is effective, and does that make it easier in the passing game?
Oh, that makes it a lot easier, because if our defensive line is doing their job, playing well, that makes it a lot easier for me. It makes it harder for the quarterback, makes his throws, gets him off his throws and stuff, so it helps me a lot.
Now, after last week's game, obviously you guys let up a lot of points, but what can you take away from a game like that?
That just, goes to show you that we need to be playing together as a team, because last week we did not play as a team, and as you saw, the results really were not there at all. So.
And then what are you hoping to achieve this season?
I think the biggest part is making it back to the playoffs. That's the biggest thing I really want to do. I think we want to do this season, make it back to the playoffs.
All right. Thank you very much, Stu. Next up, we'll have Poms coach, Mrs. Burton. Welcome back. We are now here with Poms and competitive dance coach, Kristin Burton. How are you doing today, Coach?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. What kind of undertaking is it to be in charge of Poms and competitive dance?
Well, it makes for a really busy school year, but I have a lot of fun doing both of them. Poms is strictly a fall sport, and then when we move into the winter season, it's strictly competitive. So neither of them overlap, which is nice, but I'm also the Orcs director, so then that throws in another curveball. But
competitive dance was just recently created at Prospect, so I don't know if all students know what competitive dance is exactly about. What is competitive dance?
So competitive dance is an IHSA competitive sport. Their season is winter, like I said, and 3 years ago I had the conversation with Mr. Minter, and competitive dance in the MSL, we were having an MSL competitive dance competition, and Prospect would have been the only school not represented. So we decided that this would be a really positive addition to Prospect sports, and so I was super excited to be named the coach, and that's where we are. So we're starting our third season.
And then just last year you made state. What was it like for you as a team to make state?
So we actually made state our first year, which was 2 years ago, and we were like beyond ecstatic. We worked really, really hard. Nobody knew who Prospect was in the competitive world, and so it was one of our goals, and it felt really great to meet our goal of the first season.
And then what are you doing with the dance team right now for the upcoming season?
So right now the girls are working just on conditioning and skills. Our season starts October 24th, and that's when we can start practicing our routine. So right now it's just conditioning, skills to then build upon in our routine.
And then, of course, right now you're in the fall season, so you're focused on Poms. What has the season been so far for Poms?
Poms is really, really fun to be a part of. I love being at the football games. It's fun to have my family at the football games, as well as cheering on the girls, coaching the girls. So it brings in a different dynamic, because I have always, been on the stage or in the competitive world. So Poms is a little bit, it's just a really fun environment.
You talk about the fun in football games, and then just how exciting is it for you to put in all that work and then be able to show that off for your Poms team on Friday nights alongside the football team?
It's great. The girls work really, really hard all season long. We went to Poms camp for 4 days in July, and so I feel like all of their hard work then pays off in front of their peers, their families, and the community.
Great. Thank you very much. Next up is Coach Sebestyen to preview this week's matchup against Niles North. We're back now with Coach Sebestyen to look at this week's game against Niles North. Now, Niles North last week, they lost 29-26 in overtime. What kind of effect do you think you'll see that have on Niles North heading into this week's game?
I don't think you'll see that have any effect. I think their coaching staff's a good staff. They'll make sure that their kids have, learned from the previous game, respond. They've now experienced in overtime, so they got some idea how to obviously perform in that, and they'll move forward. I think what you'll find with high school football players, especially, is they're very resilient, and they move on from situations very quickly and focus on the next week. So I don't think you'll see any residual effect whatsoever for them. I think they'll be ready to go and play football on Friday night.
And you spoke of their coaching staff. The coach of Niles North is brother of New England's Patriots, Jimmy Garoppolo. What do you think it's like taking on a coach like that that's been in a football family and has a lot of football knowledge that he can give to his team?
Well, unless Jimmy's going to be showing up behind quarterback for Niles North, I'm not really all that concerned about that. I think what you do see is, the Garoppolo family is a great family. Mike played at Rolling Meadows, before Jimmy. We've played against Mike. Back in, I think, if I remember right, it's 04, 05 is when he's a junior, senior. He plays as a sophomore too, I believe in 03. Really good tight end, defensive end. Was a very good football player. Great young man. He's got a great future ahead of him. Obviously, as the head coach at Niles North in his first year. I think, what is you're going to get someone who's going to be very prepared when it comes to the game of football, understands the game of football, and will be very successful, I think, as he goes forward here. So, it's, I think for a lot of people, it's, kind of a cool niche type thing to talk about. But, we played Jimmy in 09. We've seen enough of Jimmy. We're good. So unless he's showing up behind center on Friday night, that's really not going to be something that's going to enter into the equation.
Then wide receiver for Niles North, Jordan LaBelle has been one of their bigger playmakers this year. What is your plans to contain him?
Well, I think we've got to focus on containing the entire offense. I think while he's obviously a very nice receiver and has done a heck of a job both last year and this year, they've got a good core receivers out on the edge. The quarterback's a very talented, athletic kid. He's a good runner, throws a nice ball. The running backs are pretty good. They've got a nice core lineman. So I think the bigger thing is just trying to make sure that we're improving and playing within our scheme to make sure that our unit's ready to go going forward. I think if you focus on one guy, you tend to end up slacking in terms of what you should be doing in your job, and other guys tend to hurt you. I know we've had people try to do that before where, you can go back to years where people like to focus on Miles Jose all the time. And then, next thing you know, Pete Bonham's running for 353 yards, or Grant DePalma's running for 220, in games. It's like you want to focus on one. They've got other athletes too. They're gonna hurt you, and that's what Niles North has. They have other athletes. They have a good football team. So I think that's really the focus at this point, is making sure we play smart as a unit and not necessarily get blinded by one specific person.
Then how do you take last week's loss and just kind of put it out of your head and make sure your players are focused on this week's game?
I think by getting back to your basics, and that's what we really have tried to do this week, is get back to basics. Yesterday, we had a really good practice. It was a little bit limited by the weather in terms of the heat and everything, but we were able to really focus in on task. We got after it. It was a very short session in terms of what we were trying to do. But the kids were very focused, very mentally tuned into what they were supposed to be doing. It was very crisp, and I think that's all you can ask at this point. They got back to basics yesterday. They got back to basics on Monday. That's what we'll look to obviously do as we get to practice here today. And that's really, I think, the key is getting back to doing the little things that we do as a football program, as a unit, defensively, offensively, as special teams. If we do that, I think we'll be okay going forward. So, the Barrington game's over, just like the Hinsdale South game was over by the time, Monday rolled around. We're on to the next game and the next thing. We live in a what have you done for me lately society. So we're focused on what we need to do going forward and answering the question, I think, for ourselves more than anything else, who are we as a football team? Are we the team that showed up week 1, or are we the team that showed up week 2? Who are we? What are we about? What is going to be our focus as we go forward? What is the milieu of the Prospect football program in 2016? What do we as a group? So I think that's going to be the concern going forward. And who are we? And getting back to basics will help that.
What do you think is going to be the keys to this week's game?
I think just the same concept of just playing within ourselves, within our scheme, within our units, and trusting in what we're doing as a team, defensively especially, but even offensively. I think controlling the clock offensively, which we did not do last week, will be a big deal because it helps keep our defense off the field. And I think field position. I think the special teams unit, again, is going to be huge. If we can establish a field position where we're playing with short fields consistently, which we actually did a lot of last week, we just didn't do a good job moving the ball at times. I think that'll be a big deal. If we can do those things, that gives us a better chance, obviously. And look, for us, it's protecting our home field. We talk a lot about the fact that we play 5 home games. It's about protecting our home turf. If you can make sure that you go undefeated at home, it's a big deal. Well, this is step 2 to that goal. So we want to try to make sure we do that, and for 48 minutes play prospect style football.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Good luck in this week's game.
Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate it.
This has been Week 3 of Prospect Football Weekly, brought to you by Buffalo Wild Wings, and hopefully we will see you all after another home victory.